Good afternoon, students. We'll start in about a minute. There is just a guest named Roby whose mic is on. If you could just please disable it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It just interferes a little bit. Yeah, okay, so it is 4 o'clock. So without further ado, let's start. I am just switching off on my camera momentarily so that you guys can see what I look like. But I'm going to switch it off just so that you guys save data. Your cameras have been disabled on my end, but your mics are enabled. So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, and then we can get to those questions as and when we pause for comments or questions or whatever. Right. So today's webinar is about preparing for success. And what I actually wanted to get across here is that if you don't start working at the start of the semester, you are setting yourself up for failure once we get into the exam and the semester test period. So last week we did a seminar or a webinar on goal setting. If you missed it, you're welcome to reach out and we can speak about what you missed and the importance of goal setting. But this links with that because we are looking at how are you going to achieve your goals now that you know where you are on your way to. Right. So for this seminar, the outcomes are how to be an organized student, basic law skills you need to be successful, how to prepare for class, and why class prep is so important. So your lecturers would have hammered on these things a lot during the last couple of weeks, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, but I'm clever. Why should I waste my time when I can pick up whatever I let fall on the ground later in the semester? So we know that we want to be successful lawyers one day, right? That's the ultimate goal for any law student, right? Or you want to have your law degree to enable you to do other things, right? Or to live a successful life. Without a goal, without a plan, a goal is just a wish. Right, the notification sign, I'm sorry, I cannot determine where that is coming from. So I do apologize for that. Right, so we need to know where we are going and we need to know why or how we're going to get there. We do that by setting smart, specific goals that we can reach within the next 6 months or within the year. This is a recap of last week, right? Then we spoke about managing your time, making room in your day in order for you to get to everything. Okay, so today we're going to look at those little blocks that say prepare for URI such and such. What are you supposed to do in those blocks? Right. It's also important that your general lifestyle choices are good choices. So getting enough sleep, eating healthy and balanced, getting enough exercise, etc. Right? These are important things that you need to pay attention to. You need to surround yourself with people who are going to contribute positively to your life. You need to study. And you need to go and see your lecturers because they are the people who know best what you need from their modules, right? So use them as a resource. I'm not saying have like a weekly check-in with every single professor or lecturer that you have, but if there is something that you are struggling with, they are the first point of contact, right? You can either go and see them, or if tutorials or facilitation is available for that module, then we strongly encourage you guys to make use of that as well. Right. But what if you look like this guy, right? What if you feel overwhelmed by the end of the semester, right? It feels like books are falling on top of your head. You are anxious. You don't know where you are going. We start with the study guide. And the reason why we have to start with the study guide is because that is where your lecturer starts, okay? The study guide. I'm just going to unplug two things and see if that's not what's causing the sound, because I'm going crazy. Sorry. Right. So the study unit outcomes are very important, because at the end of your lesson or at the end of the semester, this is what the lecturer is going to come back to, and they're going to see, okay, but did you manage to reach these outcomes? So the outcomes are like the goals that the lecturers set, and they want to see, have you been able to get this under the knee, and should you pass this module, yes or no? So we see that this is for URI 311, and I actually combined 2 pages from this for this slide. So the first study unit outcome is just Introduction to Entrepreneurial Law, and then the second one is companies. And in the part where we're looking at companies, we need to look at legal personality, types of companies, and registration of companies. And this will obviously then link to what the lecturer is saying and what you have to read in preparation for class, right? So if we those outcomes underneath 2.1, it uses words like analyze, determine, distinguish, explain. And those are words that we need to be able to link to questions when we answer question papers in the semester test week or in the exam, right? So we start with this because if we know what is a legal personality and we can analyze whether a specific thing like the university is a legal personality, then we've done that first study unit outcome. Then the next one is determine under which circumstances the corporate veil may be lifted, right? So you need to know what is a corporate veil, and then you need to know the circumstances. So underneath that one, there are 2 things that you need to know. And if you go and you study your study unit outcomes before going to class, right? So this is where you physically start is, okay, what am I supposed to know when I walk out of class? Because this is what the lecture and the test are going to be set around, right? So where can I get the study guide, right? You go to eFundi, and I'm just going to show you on eFundi. If you go to unplug the mouse, if you go to your law communique, your eFundi site on the home site, here where it says study guides, if you click there, it will open up a new window, and in that window you can just physically type in your module code, and it will spew out all of the relevant things. So this is URI. If you type in 111, you will see there's Mafeking, there's Potch, there is VAL, right? So you can see which ones are relevant. These are all 2024, and you can just download it from here. Okay, so that's where you access your study guide. It is also usually uploaded underneath the resources tab on your module eFundi site. Okay, so that is where we access the study guide, and where we have a look then at the study unit outcomes. Right, then we move on to the textbook. So now this is entrepreneurial law, as I've mentioned, and the textbook that is prescribed has to be available in the library. Now, importantly, if you are going to use the library, you are making yourself part of a large group who use a small amount of resources, which means that you might have to wait for textbooks, and it also means that you might not be able to study that specific subject when you want to, right? This is a screenshot of the electronic textbook that I took, right? So you can actually access the electronic textbooks on the library's website in most cases, right? But the access does vary depending on the intellectual property contracts and constraints that they have with the library. So Where can you find the textbook? You can obviously go and buy it at the bookstore, but you can also access it via the library's website. So if you put in the title of the book there and you say search, then you will find it on the library's website. Okay. This is also very, very nice if you want to like save it. You can't always, you'll see here at the top, it says full download. This is not always available for all of your textbooks, right? And it then is in PDF format, which means you can't use it to write and things like that. Okay, so there are drawbacks. This is obviously a little bit cheaper, but you know, having the physical textbook is always going to be beneficial because you can use it later on when you need something from the textbook again. Things like entrepreneurial law are very connected with other subjects, so it might be worth it to physically own the books. Okay, right. Then when you read the textbook, so this is all still preparation before the time, right? If you read the textbook, and we take that little paragraph, I see now that it's cut off, but if we read that, it might be a little bit confusing, right? It's a lot of words, point number one. Point number two, it's all typed. Everything looks exactly the same. So where do you start? Okay. For me, it always works to take it paragraph by paragraph or subheading by subheading. If we use the subheadings, that links the definition at the bottom quite nicely with the heading. So you have the concept or the idea, and then you have the definition underneath that. For first and second years, you're going to have to connect a heading like a partnership to an example, which is obviously going to be in your case law, right? So case law, we study in a different manner. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay. So for now, if I have to look at this paragraph, right, it's a lot of words and some of the words can be quite confusing, right? So a partnership is actually a combination of more than one sole proprietorship. What is a sole proprietorship, right? If you look at this page, you'll see that number A was a sole proprietorship. So you should have some idea, right? So it builds on each other. Still, it feels a little bit like I'm going to read this and I'm going to get to the end of the paragraph and I'm not going to know what's cooking. But if I take a pen and a pencil, I do apologize for the quality of this, but I took a picture with my phone after I printed it. So this is that same paragraph. But now what I've done is I've actually underlined some keywords. So immediately I can see combination of more than one sole proprietorship, contribute to a partnership fund, fiduciary duties, capital acquisition, same as that of a sole proprietorship, or losses and liability if the partnership is not successful, etc., etc. And then I've actually gone and I've written down in my kind of shorthand in the margins, what do I understand of this paragraph? So why is this important? Firstly, it helps your brain to interpret what you are reading. You are putting it into your own words, which means that you understand it in this way, right? And then when you go to class and the lecturer talks about a partnership, then you'll remember, okay, I remember it's a sole proprietorship plus one. So it's one or more sole proprietorship. They put all or both equal money. So all of them put money in. Capital is easy because both put money in. Liability and assets for both. So you share in the liability and the assets. And then at the end, they pool their resources. If one leaves, then the contract is null and void. So that is what I understand of a partnership, even before I've gone to class, right? And for me, this is where we start building the foundation for our house. When we study for the exam is the roof of the house, right? But if we don't have a foundation and we haven't got walls and windows, then the whole roof is going to come tumbling down. And that is why we need to work proactively during the course of the semester. So now that I have this idea, okay, I go to class. And when I go to class, I sit in class and I actually make notes. So many students who come to see me know that I say make notes in class. And then they tell me that, ma'am, it's very difficult to keep my attention. When I write down, I sometimes lose focus. But this is just to show you that I've actually gone to class and I've made these notes. And what we can see here is that these are the study unit outcomes that I've written here. The sole proprietorship is a him or a her. It's a personal liability. So this is what was on the slide plus what the lecturer said, right? And from this, then I go home and I take my textbook, I take the notes that I've made, and then what do I do with it, right? So is this all that I do? No. I go and I make sure that I've read, right? So I surveyed, I skimmed, I questioned, and I read before I recite and recall for the exam. So how do I recite and recall? By physically writing out notes. So this is Q3R method. That is how you are going to make sure that you actively recall the work that you've done, right? So what can I learn from this text? What do I hope to learn from this text? And then when you read one section at a time, what can I remember from this text? This is everything that you do during class and before class. Success is something you learn, not something you have, right? So the more you practice, the luckier you get. That is what the golf player said. What is his name now? Gary Player. He said, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So the more you get into the habit of having a set schedule, taking notes in class, combining your notes in class with the notes from the textbook, right? The more practiced your brain will be in recalling and reciting that information. So what about the slides? So this is an example not of URI 311, but of 211. So you'll see that I then actually use the slides as the foundation for my summary. What this helps with is that when I have the slide, it ensures that I don't miss anything. That's point number one. Point number two is these are the things that the lecturer focused on. And then when I put my own notes in, right, it shows my brain that it actually understands the work. Now, this does not work for everybody. Okay, I'm a visual learner, so visually this looks kind of appealing to me. A little chaos is always good. Someone else will not benefit from this, okay? And that is why it is important to make your own notes. So either you're going to have a hardcover book or you are going to use the slides. Whatever works for you, works for you. What is important for me is you have to write in your own handwriting, and you have to write regularly, and you have to write at least twice or 3 times over the work, because this practices your muscle memory before you get to the recite recall part, which is like the final part of exam preparation. But if you didn't do the S, which is the survey, the question, which is the module outcomes, and the reading with your notes in tow, right? Then trying to recite and recall is going to be an almost futile practice. Okay, so this is then what do I do with the slides? So what about case law? Before we get to case law, is there anybody who wants to comment or ask anything related to how do I prepare for class? Okay, Awesome. So what about my case? Just want to see the next slide. Okay, so importantly, okay, sorry, Tandu, yes?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to ask a question about the SQR3R method, if I'm not mistaken. So how, just a brief explanation of how we would be going through that. So would the survey and the question part of it be like that class preparation, and then the rest is what you would do after class?
So the survey and the question, that is the study unit outcomes, right? So what am I supposed to learn from this? The study unit outcome tells you what are you supposed to learn from this. And then the questions are, will I be able to answer these study unit outcomes if they were in the form of a question? Okay. You can also say, okay, if I have this study unit outcome as a question, will I be able to connect the case with this particular part of the theory? The reading is also part of the preparation. So the reading is that part, okay? So you do S, Q, and R before you go to class. Then you recite by remembering what you did here during this step while you are in class, and then the recite and remember. The recite is kind of like multiple times that you are going to write this work. So you're going to recite it, right, when you are in class, and then you're going to recite it when you use the slides to make notes, and then you're going to recite it when you make the summaries that you're going to study in order to remember the work. All right, I hope that answers your question. So basically, when we do the test prep for your semester test, right, then we'll look at how do I study and how do I answer questions? How do I know what this question wants from me? Then we're going to look at recite and recall in a little bit more depth. What I want us to now focus on is, we know that we want those distinctions, or we know that we want to get 65 or 55 for our participation mark. How do I use my everyday in order to get there, right? So unfortunately, I always say that the law is like the engineering of the humanities, right? You guys didn't sign up for an easy degree, but it is going to be worth it, right? Because you're going to set yourselves up for success. But because you are choosing to be successful one day and to be lawyers one day, unfortunately, there is going to be a little bit of a give and take. And part of that give is going to be my free time. So in my free time, I sit and I work consciously through the material at all times. It's not about kind of overworking yourself. It's about building that foundation and putting in the work so that when the lecturer comes, you can actually say, okay, yes, I remember what a partnership is. I read about it there. And you can actually actively participate. Or you can say, ma'am, I don't know what a partnership is. Can you please explain to me how two sole proprietorships form a partnership? And then that lecturer can explain to you what is going on. Tandu, you say you can't hear. Is everybody else? Thank you, Lianka. Everybody else can hear. Tandu, sometimes, especially if I have, okay, well, she can't hear me. Right. Maybe someone can just answer her. Just make sure about your speakers. Right. Okay. So I'm going to continue while she sorts that out. Right. So when we get to the cases are the example that you are going to use. So for instance, if we have a partnership, the partnership is our concept. When we have the concept and we know the definition, then we need to be able to link the concept and the definition to an example. And as lawyers, our examples are always cases. Okay, so again, how do I make this immense summary of a case easy for myself to understand? Now, most of you would have heard about FIRAC already, right? So the facts of the case is what happened, right? What happened between these two parties? Who are the two parties? So you have to see it as a little bit of you are an investigator, right? So it's a true crime story. And you have to figure out who is taking whom to court and why are they taking each other to court. That is basically what you have to determine when you read the case. Okay, so the facts of the case is what happened and who was involved. The legal issue is why should the courts be involved? And the court should be involved because usually the two parties had a legal issue which is related to your legislation that you are going to learn within your specific modules. And that rule of law, that legislation is going to be what the judge used in that specific example in order to apply and make the judgment. The application and the conclusion is usually one paragraph, and we look at how did the judge use the legislation to make a judgment and what was the remedy that was decided upon. Should there be damages paid? Should the person go to jail? Whatever the case may be. Okay. So if I take that big paragraph now and I try and highlight for myself the facts, right? I can see, okay, who was involved? Municipal Councillor Jones, and then there is a municipal manager, Mr. Africa. I'm sorry, I didn't highlight that one. What is the big thing? It's about the Electoral Commission, the DA and the ANC are involved. And we see in this summary, the legal issue or the legislation is Section 27A of the Local Government Municipal Structures Act of 1998. So already we know who is involved, what happened, what is the rule of law, and that big paragraph at the bottom, that is going to be the application and the remedy. Okay, so the remedy is the court decided there is no resignation because all of the steps weren't followed, right? This is just very shortly, it's a summary. Okay, so where do I get the summary? There is a SAFLI that you can use, right? So you search the name of the court ruling, and usually if it's a big case, there is a summary. The summary is sufficient for you to identify the facts, the rule of law. You don't have to necessarily read everything. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing, if there is no summary available of the case, you can use a processor like ChatGPT to insert the case and to summarize the case for you. So you highlight all of the text, you paste it into ChatGPT and you say, please summarize the facts of this case, right? And if they spit it out, then you take the same text and you say, please summarize the rule of law in this case, okay? Important caveat here, right? If we use ChatGPT, we always have to use it in a clever way. What do I mean by that? You always have to double check that ChatGPT didn't make a mistake, because a processor like ChatGPT is US based, so they don't necessarily understand the rule of law as we apply it and as you study it at this university. Okay, so use the tools that are available, but use them in a way that you aren't going to become lazy. That's point number one. And point number two is you have to double check, right? So it helps with things like summarizing, rephrasing, things like that, but it can't think for you. So if you want to use a processor like ChatGPT to think for you, you are going to get poor marks. I'm just going to tell you that straight out, right? So use it in a way that's going to be beneficial, right? Work smart, but make sure that you aren't going to shoot yourself in the foot by believing a word processor like ChatGPT. So always make sure that whatever ChatGPT gives you, that it is legitimate, okay? And it always works to kind of break it down into chunks. And like I said, it's very good with summarizing or reformulating, but it's not good with thinking or creating arguments. And that is why you're not supposed to use it for assignments, but we'll get to assignments and things like that as well. Okay. So from this paragraph, then in my summary that I write, I say, okay, the facts of the case are that Mr. Jones was resigning as a DA ward councillor, and the second fact is Mr. Jones retrieved the letter before the 7 days provided for in the Act. The legal issue is, under the circumstances, is the resignation valid? And what constitutes a valid resignation, right? So these are the two things that the court had to decide upon. And this is very evident from that summary of the case. So I didn't have to read the entire case in order to determine this. Right. So the rule of law is, this is section 27A of the Local Government Municipal Systems Act. And there was a case that was cited, Swart versus Vosloo. And this would have been prescribed. So important, why is there a picture of a student there? The student, which is you, would have studied all of this, should have studied all of this before going to the exam venue. The only part that is going to maybe be a little bit of an interpretation is going to be the analysis and the conclusion. And this you should also always write in the form of a well-formulated paragraph. And in that paragraph, you use the cases that you've studied, right? So in this instance, we used Swart versus Vosloo, and then it says it reached the conclusion. So what was the conclusion that the court made? So those two phrases are very important, to use the case as an example, and then also to say, okay, this is the conclusion. This is what the court decided upon. And the court decided that there was no valid resignation. Okay, so this is very elaborate, but it can be as simple as 1 or 3 bullets, okay? If you know the story of who wanted what from whom and why was the court involved, you should be fine with remembering your cases. One of the final year lecturers, he wants his students to draw pictures. This helps for students who are visually inclined. If you have to kind of write out the story or think of a funny rhyme, that's also fine. You have to make it digestible for your brain. I think that's the easy thing. The difficult part is to make it as easy as possible for yourself, right? What I found helps is to have a friend who doesn't study law, who isn't in my year of law, and to try and explain a case to them. If they understand it, then I know that I understand, right? So make it as digestible for yourself as possible, okay? There are subjects where they wanted word for word for word, but in most cases, it's about, do you know what happened in the case and can you use it in an argument? So those are the two main things that the lecturer wants. Okay, so that is how we tackle the FIRAC method when it comes to cases. Okay, this is not how you then answer your questions. Your answering is going to be the ideal method. I just want to reiterate again the FIRAC method. So the ideal method we'll speak about when we do test prep. So the FIRAC method is then the facts, the legal issue, the rule of law, the application, and the conclusion that the court made. All of that goes into the column of example. So the examples for every piece of idea or concept or definition that you've studied is going to be the case. And the case is going to then be built into that example part. So when we answer questions, we use ideal. And this is where we write down the idea. The idea is usually given to you in the question. So it will be something like, Tabu and Sunny went into a partnership selling lemonade in front of their parents' house. Is this a valid partnership? So the idea is partnership. What is a partnership? Then you define the partnership. Do you know of instances where partnerships have gone wrong or whatever the case might be? Then that is your example. And then you say, okay, because of this example, I can clearly say that Thabo and Sunny are in a partnership. Okay, this is very simple, but it doesn't have to be as extremely complicated as we sometimes think the work is. Okay, so it's about using the examples, linking those examples with the ideas that we studied, and then making sure that we can link that with the scenario that is given in the question. Okay, if you are in your first or second year, what they're going to expect of you is to have the idea and to define the idea and to give the example that links with the definition. When you are in third year, it's going to have to be, can you link this idea and example to the question? When you are in your final year, it's going to be, can you have multiple ideas, multiple definitions, and multiple examples in one question or in one answer? Okay, so something like trust law, for instance, their questions are like 25 marks per question. And usually there's like 2 or 3 ideas that need to be defined, that need to be elaborated upon. The elaboration is the theory, and then the example given. Right, so just in short, we study the FIRAC method for our cases so that we can use them as examples when we have to argue for or against something. Okay, right, so before I move on with what else can I do to be a successful law student, is there any questions about the FIRAC method? I'm just taking a sip of water. Awesome, Tandu, thank you for the thumbs up. Right, so all of this happens during our semester, right? The only thing that happens during semester test week or exam time is when we make summaries from our notes. So the notes are throughout. The summaries are within specific time slots like the semester test week, and we don't redo the summaries all the time. What we do is we do summaries and then we work out questions according to that ideal method, because if you can give the definition of an idea, you can give the you can answer short questions. If you can give the example that links with the idea, you can answer short questions. But if you can do all of them in one essay, then you can answer the long questions and the short questions. Okay, so it's about training yourself to be able to do this using the study unit outcomes. So each study unit outcome should be either all of those ideal headings, or it can be little parts of it. Okay. Right, so what else can I do to be a successful law student? Now, most of us come from school backgrounds, right? And because we got into studying law, we should be quite clever, okay? But as I've said to many students before, being clever is not always enough, right? So what else can I do to set myself up for success? I can be self-directed. What does that mean? I can set my own schedule. I have a diary where I write down, okay, today I need to do prep for study unit 1 of URI 311, and I need to do prep for study unit 2 of URI 313, whatever the case may be. I take ownership. So I say to everybody, this test wasn't difficult because the lecturer was vindictive, right? This is because maybe I didn't study as hard as I should have, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so I admit my own faults, right? Be motivated. So we spoke about goals. Sometimes when we're feeling like, I don't even want to go to class today, it just helps to remind ourselves that I want to be the first lawyer in the family, or I need to get that 75% so that I can get academic bursary, or whatever the case may be, right? So keep those goals for the days that you aren't feeling like going to class or doing the work. Build your content knowledge. Read often, read regularly, right? If you are someone who struggles to read, write while you are reading. That is why I say underline and reword the work for yourself, okay? Because the more knowledge you have of a specific subject matter, the better you're going to be in integrating your arguments and things like that. And then use your time wisely, set a schedule, right? And your resources. Come to see me, go to see your lecturers, go to tutorials if they are worth it, right? So I'm not saying that all tutorials are worth it. I know that some students find them more helpful than others. That's fine. But then if there's a tutorial, don't lie on your couch, you know? Use that time wisely while you have it. Okay. Right. So be organized. This is very important. Sometimes we struggle to kind of know where everything is. Now, my life hack at the moment is to use Google Drive. If you have a Google account, a Gmail account, then a Google Drive is automatically available to you. This means that you don't have to run around with a memory stick and all of that. You can simply, when you have access to the internet, access your G Drive. So I just want to quickly show you, if I go to mine, right? No, I shouldn't do that. I should have a new tab. No, new tab. New tab. Okay, so if I go to my G Drive, it's there at the top. If I open that, then I have, for myself, I have a few other personal things that I have. The Northwest University, if I open that, then I have CTL, Faculty of Law Studies. When I open Faculty of Law, I've divided it into this year and last year. If I go in there, then everything that I need there is there, right? So these are the things that I use regularly. And this is like the semester 2 admin that I had. If we go to this year, then again, it's my resources, my admin, concessions, fillable forms, presentations, student documents. So I have all of it organized, right? What also helps is if you have access to the internet and you don't necessarily have Word, then the Google Suite also has Docs, which is basically Word, Sheets, which is basically Excel, and Slides, which is basically PowerPoint. So if you save your PowerPoint slides in your subject folders and you want to open them without having access to Microsoft, you can access them if you have access to the internet. Okay, so that's my life hack. I find it reassuring to know that something is in the cloud and I can't like mess it up, right? And what's also nice about this, I don't know if this is like repetitive to anybody, but for those of us who don't know it, I did find this helps quite a bit. Yeah, if it's in the cloud, then it means it can't be lost, right? And you have quite a lot of storage space, so it's not enough to have like videos and things on here. But if you have PowerPoints, Excel sheets, and your Word documents, then you're perfectly fine. Okay. If I take, for instance, when I studied, the module that I took was 428, and here you can see admin, assignment, legislation, and then I had my study units, each one separately, right? So for everything that I then had to download cases and things like that, I have that here, right? Or if it's specific legislation that's only applicable to that study unit, then I have that there. So for each of my modules I would then have within the year 2024. I would have the module, and within that module, I would have at least admin assignments and then all of the study units. Okay, if you can download the textbook and you need to save it somewhere, then you can save it here. What's also nice is if you have multiple computers or you use computers in the library, then this is still accessible to you, even though you're on a different computer. So if you download and save something on your computer and you don't have it with you at the moment, it can be quite cumbersome sometimes. But if you have it in the cloud, then it's accessible everywhere. Okay, so that's what I mean by getting organized, right? And that's my little life hack for being organized. Right. If you are in this presentation and I didn't explain it well enough, you're welcome to just come and see me quickly, and then I will show you either on your computer or on mine, and then we make it happen. Right. Okay. So after all of that, right, then we are going to get to how do I study. Right. And this, how do I study? This is an example of what I've done. So I'm a visual learner, but we'll do more of this in upcoming webinars when we prepare for the semester test. But you'll see here, there are two things that stand out. The first thing is that I use blue instead of black ink. And that is because we remember blue ink 27% better than we remember black ink. Also important is my own handwriting. So you don't remember anybody else's handwriting or typed words, only your own. And then if you're not doing this, please start. Use specific colors for specific things. So my legislation is all in blue. My theory is all in yellow. My definitions are all in red. And if I have cases that go with subsidiarity, for example, then that is in orange. So my colors mean something. They're not arbitrarily used. And what this does, when you see the page, it reminds you of, okay, when I look at subsidiarity, what goes with that theory is this and this and this definition, or that case, or this part of the Constitution. Right. Yes. Okay, so Justin asked, would I suggest that you write rather than type? The answer is as simple as, do you write or type texts? Right? So when you are in a test, do you write or do you type? You write. So you have muscle memory, okay? And that muscle memory is best served when we are writing. When we type, each action of making an A and making a W and making a B are the same. But when we are physically writing an A and a B and a W, the movement that our hand makes is different. And we call that a kinetic memory. So your kinetic memory must be linked with your static memory, or the memory that you have about the things that you've read, right? And the more you write, the closer that link is between the kinetic memory, the muscle memory, and what you've read. Okay, so I know that the coursework is quite a lot, right? But it is better to write than to type, simply because typing is not your own handwriting and your brain only remembers your own handwriting. So having that physical touch of pen to paper creates pathways in your mind that you can then later use to recall the work that you need in the exam. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Justin. I do know that it's a lot, but it is, it does help. Okay, Tandu says, would I recommend recording yourselves? So it depends on what kind of learner you are. When you are a visual learner like I am, you can see I already told you my things are chaotic and I use color for specific things, right? So listening to things doesn't work for me. But if you are an auditory learner, then that will work for you. Okay. I don't remember if I have that quiz in here. Okay. So I have a quiz. If you want to just email me, just say, ma'am, I'm not sure what kind of learner I am. Please send me the link to the quiz. And then I will send you the link. There's a link that you can do, and it tells you your personality type and the type of learner you are based on answers about your learning style and what you do while you study and things like that. So just reach out, send me an email, and I'll share the link with you via email if you don't know. If you think you know but you're unsure, you're also welcome to email me. If you want me to email it to you, we can, yeah, I should have everybody's email address in the attendance register, but if you're afraid, you can just pop your email address. I'm going to share my email address at the end. Okay, right. Okay, so we'll look at more specific test-orientated training in the next webinar. Okay, so let's talk about emails. So I get an email. Akona, you are the last one in the chat, so I'm going to use you as an example. It's not a diss on you, right? But I get an email. It says, "Hi, ma'am. It's Akona. I want help. Kind regards." I don't know if you're a law student. I don't know who. Thank you, Charlize. Yes, that's the link to the quiz. I shared it with Charlize earlier this week. So you can follow that link, but you can also reach out. Okay, awesome. So I get this email, right? Out of the blue, I'm not sure what your surname is. I don't have your student number. I'm not sure whether you're a first year, second year, final year, whether you are a BA student with law, whether you're an LLB student or a BCom student. And it confuses not only myself, but it also frustrates the lecturers. So I've designed so this is a physical example that I've copied, right? Dear Miss, Mrs., Mr., I would like to ask what is needed for me to change my current faculty to the law faculty. If possible, I would like to book an appointment so I can get more information. Thank you. Okay, so the person did put their names there at the bottom. No idea of what they are studying at the moment, what year they are in. So just a little bit more context is always good, right? So what would an appropriate email look like? In the subject line, I will say, I have an inquiry regarding what is the course code, right? Because your lecturers don't only teach your course, okay? If we take 171, Professor Carnelli, she's also responsible for multiple postgraduate studies, right? So what is the specific course or the specific topic? Then, dear Mr. Miss Dr. Prof, name and surname. This is me, this is my student number, this is the course I'm enrolled in, this is what my issue is. Then you give 1 or 2 sentences and then you say, I've already done my due diligence, right? I've already gone to the textbook, the Ifundi, the facilitators, the tutors, Miss Mortimer, no one can help me, can you please? Right? And then at the end, you say again, what is your full name? What is your student number? And if you want them to contact you on your phone or whatever, then you use, you put that contact information there. It's just common courtesy to have a proper email. Okay, so if you want this template, you can just scan that QR code and it will link you to the template. All right, this is just something that we've picked up on. It's a generational thing because you're so used to online communication with each other. We sometimes forget that people who are in a position to lecture you are actually very knowledgeable and they do deserve a certain level of respect. So the template is just to make sure that the lecturer receives your specific query with an open heart. I think that's like the big thing with the template. Okay, right, then quick recap, what did we cover? So you have to read, okay? If you don't read, you're not going to be able to write your tests and exams properly. You have to attend lectures and you have to make notes while you are there. You have to make notes that are neat and tidy in your own handwriting before you go to a study group or before you engage with friends and the content. Okay, so study groups also, we'll talk about that in the next webinar, but study groups also don't work for everybody. So Tandu, if you are someone who listens, who learns from listening, so when you go outside, you can say, okay, this is what the lecturer said, right? Then you will be someone who has to study in a group, but that group has to be combined of people who like to teach as well, right? So I'm someone who learns through teaching. So if I can explain it to you and you can understand it, then I know that I've done my job and I understand it then, right? So you have to find your friend that's going to teach you if you are a listener, or if you are a talker, then you have to find someone who's going to listen when you teach, right? So for me, it's about finding what works, but doing your due diligence and working throughout, progressively throughout the year. Okay, right. So next week, so we do one of these for those of you who haven't been here, who weren't here last week. We do one of these every week, right? Next week, I am on holiday. So I'm going to make a video about building your subject knowledge in law specifically. And I'm going to share the link on Ifundi in the Law Communications page. You are also welcome to access the Law Communications page. There are some valuable resources there that you can use. So I'll share the video instead of doing the webinar. And then when I return, so the week of the 11th to the 15th or 16th, then we'll have a webinar. And that webinar is going to be about, okay, if this is my learning style, what does my summary look like? Who do I partner with? Do I record myself? Do I write more? Do I listen more? Etc. Right. Okay, so get in touch. Book an appointment with me. You can scan the QR code that takes you to my bookings page. The bookings page is set up in such a way that you have available time. So if the day is gray, it means that that day is already booked out. I'm not available on that day. So you choose a time slot that works for you. Importantly, you have to make sure that your time zone for your calendar is in Greenwich +2 or the Harare Pretoria time zone. Okay, so where do you do that? If you go to your Outlook, okay, it's very similar, actually a lot easier when you use Gmail. You go to your calendar, you go to settings in your calendar, and then you just have to make sure that your where is that now? There it goes. Your display calendar in time zone, Harare, Pretoria. Okay. So if it's not there like that, you're going to find that there are times available that aren't really available, and then there are clashes. So please just make sure about that before you access the bookings page. And then what happens is if you make the booking, it automatically pops into my calendar, right? So I then know when to expect you. Right. So for me, it's a thing about I like to prepare, and I like to then give you that half an hour only for you and I to discuss whatever you are struggling with. Okay. So that's the appointment. If there's anybody here from Vaal campus, I do consultations, but then that is via Teams. Right. So this is the last slide. I'm just going to enlarge it. You can email me at shanique.mortimer@nwu.ac.za, or you can book a page, or you can use my personnel number. And if you are in Mafeking, Ms. Presh Peme is there at your disposal and to help you. Right. So that's me. We are like just in time. I hope that it was a learnful experience. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm always here to help.